This article is being read by an automated voice. Chapter 3.2. The U.S. EPA excludes F-gases and TFA from PFAS definition. The U.S. Department of Environmental Protection, which regulates potentially harmful chemicals such as PFAS, has developed a definition of PFAS that differs with that recognized by the EU and the scientific community. The EU defines PFAS according to the OECD standard, which is fluorinated substances that contain at least one fully fluorinated methyl, or methylene carbon atom. This encompasses many HFCs and HFOs, as well as their atmospheric degradation product, trifluoroacetic acid. Following the OECD definition, the European Chemicals Agency, an EU body, is considering a universal restriction proposal to regulate PFAS as a category, including F-gases and TFA, under REACH, the EU's chemicals regulation. In 2024, more than 150 scientists from around the world with expertise in PFAS co-signed a statement urging governmental bodies to adopt a science-based, at least one fully fluorinated carbon atom definition of PFAS that includes F-gases and TFA. This is nearly identical to the OECD definition. However, the OECD and scientific community definition is not being used by the US EPA's Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics. In 2021, it announced a working definition of PFAS as chemicals with at least two adjacent carbon atoms where one carbon is fully fluorinated and the other is at least partially fluorinated. This definition specifically excludes TFA. In 2023, the EPA said it would take a case-by-case approach to what the agency considers a PFAS. Then, in October 2023, the EPA announced a new rule requiring reporting by manufacturers of more than 1,400 PFAS. The EPA acknowledged that its latest definition does not include substances that only have a single fluorinated carbon or unsaturated fluorinated moieties, e.g., fluorinated aromatic rings and olefins. As such, it excludes F-gases and TFA. Some U.S. states have followed the EPA in their PFAS definition, requiring at least two fully fluorinated carbon atoms and excluding gases, including Delaware and West Virginia. The at least one fully fluorinated carbon atom definition of PFAS is being used by at least 23 U.S. states, notably Maine, Minnesota, and California, the U.S. Department of Defense, and the U.S. Congress. Canada seeks information. Meanwhile, in Canada, two federal agencies, Health Canada and Environment and Climate Change Canada, have been gathering feedback on the content of the agency's revised risk management scope for per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, which contains proposals for regulating PFAS, including HFOs and HCFOs, as a class. Canada uses the OECD definition of PFAS. Information sought includes the following: the availability of alternatives to PFAS, or lack thereof, in products and applications in which they are currently used. The socioeconomic impacts of replacing PFAS, including costs and feasibility of elimination or replacement. The types, quantities, and concentrations of PFAS in products manufactured in, imported into, and sold in Canada. The revised Risk Management Scope Report was released in July 2024, along with the updated draft State of Per- and Polyfluoroalkyl Substances, PFAS report, which proposes treating PFAS as a class of chemicals that may cause harm to human health and the environment. The revised Risk Management Scope Report addresses HFOS and HCFOS as part of the PFAS class. The report notes that other F-gases, such as CFCs, HCFCs, and HFCs, are already controlled in Canada under the Ozone-Depleting Substances and Halocarbon Alternatives regulations. Should risk management actions on HFOS and/or HCFOS be required, the report adds, they would be developed in alignment with and complementary to existing regulations with controls on PFAS, such as ODSHAR, and the Prohibition of Certain Toxic Substances Regulations, 2012. The updated draft State of PFAS report, which calls TFA a PFAS on the basis of the OECD definition, has extensive information on the proliferation of TFA in the environment and its potential health impacts. The Canadian government plans to eventually publish a final State of PFAS report and an accompanying risk management approach document. If the former report confirms that the class of PFAS is toxic, the latter report will outline and seek input on proposed risk management instruments. Maine on the move. Maine enacted a sweeping PFAS regulation in 2021 and updated it in August 2024. The state has set an effective date of January 1st, 2040, for the prohibition on sales of products containing intentionally added PFAS, including cooling, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, or refrigeration equipment. Maine defines intentionally added PFAS as PFAS added to a product or one of its product components to provide a specific characteristic, appearance, or quality, or to perform a specific function. This includes products that consist solely of PFAS under the law, meaning some HFC and HFO refrigerants would be covered by the law, including HFC 125, HFC 134A, HFC 143A, HFO 1234YF, HFO 1234, ZEE HFO 1336 MZZZ, and HFO 1336 MZZE. It would not cover HFC 32, which is not a PFAS. Maine's updated PFAS law also establishes a PFAS source reduction program based on available funding aimed at reducing the presence of PFAS in discharges to air, water, and land by encouraging the use of safer alternatives to, and the proper management of materials containing, PFAS. Maine's law notes that intentionally added PFAS includes any degradation byproducts serving a functional purpose or technical effect within the product or its components. That would not apply to TFA, however. HFO-1234YF itself would be covered, thereby preventing the formation of TFA in the atmosphere. TFA may be prohibited as a PFAS by the Maine law in 2032, when bans of PFAS not already banned, except for refrigerants and HVAC and R equipment, go into effect.